when Verla moved up here, she was in the first grade. And her dad bought a ranch right next to my dad's ranch. And we did, it was across the road, and her house was across the road, and my was across the road on the other way. And so we knew, I knew her from the time she was 13, and we lived so close together that you might say we've been together all our life, pretty much. So when we got in high school, I happened to get on the ball team my freshman year, and on the main basketball team. That's all they had was basketball. And then my freshman year, we went state and took state. And then sophomore year, and then my junior year, we went up and took state. And she's a big cheerleader, and I was a big star on the basketball game, or basketball team. So I get that one reason we got dating, because she was a big cheerleader, I was a big ball player. And then how we started it, we lived right by each other, so if she ever needed a ride home or any time, our parents would always have me bring her home. And that's what started the dating. I ain't why she took after me, because she was fairly tall, not real tall, but for girls she had good height, and I had good height.
Well, you don't need to say it like that.
Well,
just
anyhow,
I liked you because you was tall and I was
tall.
tall.
and she didn't like
I didn't like to be taller
dance
than the boys.
or didn't like go with the shorter boy than me. And so Charles, I was tall enough, and her, and I was dark-headed.
Charles.
And my sister Lorna, she taught me a dance. She did, every time we start on the radio, she'd drive me and she'd say, "Charles, you're not going to be one sitting on the bench. You're going to dance." And so she liked to dance, and so I think that's one reason she went to me, because I liked to dance, and I danced, and I was taller than her. That's probably why she did. It wasn't my looks or anything. Probably didn't.
He was good looking.
And back then, in their days, dancing was a big theme.
We had dances every Sunday, every
Saturday night. I don't know what it was every, but it was a couple times a month, you know. They'd have a dance there.
Those
on
were
that
big
cement
fun
slab.
days.
Their family there, they played the musical, you know. I had to dance. We was dancing, and I don't know, I must have got shown all a little bit. Anyhow, I fell down, and she just stood there and looked at me. Instead of help me, she just stood there and looked at me.
Laughed.
And laughed. Everybody started laughing.
It was funny.
I cussed her too, though. I said, at least you could have reached your hand down and helped me a little bit.
He was a good dancer.
Lorna had one what taught me jiggerbug.
He was the only boy in our crowd that could dance decent.
I do that to give that credit to Lorna, my sister. She's taught me a two-step and jiggerbug, and I don't know, foxtrot. She taught me about everything. Jay was trying to court her quite bad, and so I come in from range, and she knew I was in. Well, and my mother, she always said, "Charles, you don't go up and see Verla." And I told her, "No, I don't think I will." "No, you better go up." I won't give my mother credit for that. And so I decided to go up, and I drove up there, and her dad was coming in from barn, and he said, "Hello, Charles, come on in." And so I went in, and there sat Jay in there, and so anyhow we talked a minute, and finally Jay left. Is that
well,
right?
Charles don't know, but I knew he was in, and I knew he'd come up. And so I told Jay I was sick and
Yeah.
I couldn't go with him that night. Pretty soon Jay got wild onto it, and he knew. So he left, and he went down to the road where you go back onto the
Main
highway, and
highway.
he waited. And then I made Charles stay there quite a little while, and finally I left with him. And when we come down, Jay followed us for a while. And I laid down in front of the pickup so he wouldn't know I was in, but he knew I was there. Finally, I just sat up, and he was mad at me, but it wasn't a week later. He asked me he had a car, and he was one that would take us to the movie. And he asked me to go to the movie, and I was shocked, but I wanted to see the movie, so I went. And we got in the movie, and he laid into me.
From then on, why, I don't think she stepped out on me any after that. Home from school.
I took him for a
And
ride.
Verla, we went in the house, and of course she was going to take me for a ride in the Jeep, in the Jeep pickup. And we took out, and what did you do?
I don't know, but something bad went wrong with
She
it.
done something, hit or turned or something, and something broke on the steering. So we had to walk back to the house.
Until my folks
Until her
had to
folks-
have it fixed. It was awful.
She was known to show me, take me for a big ride, you know. In the summer, we'd go and raid the watermelon patch.
Yeah.
We'd do watermelon. And everybody knew it, we'd do it. So they wouldn't get too mad at us, you know. I guess they'd raise enough for us and for them more, you know. And
Ash Springs
Ash
was
Springs.
our main activity in
Oh, yeah.
Alamo in the summer. Everybody come to swim in Ash Springs. We had picnics up there. We went up there and stayed. Some of us girls even slept overnight up there, a time or two when we got older.
a lot
that was
of time we'd ride our horses up there.
And go swimming.
And go
Everybody
swimming,
swim
you
in
know,
Ash. They come from
everybody.
all over Las Vegas to swim in Ash. We had true love because that last year I wanted to be a cheerleader my 4th year, and Charles had a fit to think I was going to out be cheering for the other kids, so I didn't go out for cheerleader that year just so he'd be happy. And we fell in love, and eventually, of course, got married.
I ain't one reason we got true love, I guess you call it, probably from the time we was little. I looked at some of the pictures when we was a little kid, and I can't believe we ended up getting married.
We got married in the St. George Temple. None of Charles's family had been to the temple at that time, but his parents were very supportive of us, and they all came over and was there when we got out of the temple. Anyway, we got married on June the 22nd, 1954. I'll get it right.
Well, she told me when we started getting kind of serious, and I kind of was hesitating about getting married, but she said, no, we're getting married. She said, I'm not going to marry you. If you don't take me through the temple, I won't marry you. and I want to say, I'm just going to test her and see if she will. But I never did. I decided, well, and I always tell her, I always ask her, would you have married me if I went and took you to the temple? And she won't answer me. So she probably wouldn't have done it. So I guess that's what you call true love. I decided if I was going to marry her, I better take her through the temple. And I don't regret it.
My mother's name was Gertrude Bingham Nelson, and my father's name was Leland M. Nelson. They met in Tucson, Arizona, and married there. They were sealed in the Mesa Temple, and then they moved to San Francisco for a while, and then moved here in Alamo. They both died here in Alamo. And my siblings were Lee Nelson and Karma Nelson Stewart, and Jake Alvin Nelson, and myself. I was the youngest in my family. When my folks moved from Tucson, we went to San Francisco, and my folks worked in the shipyards there building ships after World War I. We moved from San Francisco to Alamo when I was in the 3rd grade. And when we were in about the 3rd or 4th, my folks moved this old It was an army barracks. They moved it from Tonopah and built it and made it our home, and we lived here for years. They lived here the rest of their lives, pretty near. Anyway, this is where I lived all the time I went to high school. This is where I first courted my husband, Charles.
I own the field right above here, so I went by here several times, going back and forth up to my field.
My brother and I, Jake, used to walk from here over to the high school, or over to the old highway, to catch the bus every morning. I can remember when I got in high school and I was kind of going with Charles. If he was in a good mood, he'd get his dad's pickup and bring me home. I sure liked it when he gave me a ride home and I didn't have to walk that far. A lot of fond memories of this house and the ranch. All of my mother's and dad's brothers and sisters, they'd give their children in a choice of where to go, to Disneyland or Alamo, and they'd all choose Alamo. They loved it because of Ash and because of the ranch and the horses and all that kind of stuff. Not only that, we had good neighbors. Charles's mother and dad and my mother and dad were good friends.
They was old fishing partners.
Our mothers were old fishing partners, went fishing all over. They had 3 or 4 ladies that went with them, Mary Lee and Aunt Ardith. They had a good time fishing. This is this is one of the first things that was built on the ranch. It's called an old tie, and it's what they used to call root cellars. And everybody had to do that. We bottled a lot of fruit, and it stored food for us that we'd get off the ranch. It brings a lot of old memories. My folks sold eggs my mother got 300 chickens when we first moved here to the ranch to have an income, and we sold eggs to Las Vegas. I can remember candling them in here and putting them in the box to send to Las Vegas. My dad had the first dairy barn in the valley that had the pipeline milkers. It was really the newest barn in the valley. A lot of guys went into the pipelines after my dad did. They sent a big truck from Las Vegas to pick the milk up every other day. This is the barn that's what's left of it. He ran the dairy for years. Hired a man that used to help him milk. They milked a lot of cows and sold a lot of milk to Las Vegas for years and years. That's how they made their living on the ranch. Come on. This building down here is the old chicken coop. Like I told you before, by the cellar, we used to raise chickens. And one morning I remember my dad running into the house and saying, "Mother, where's the gun? Where's the gun?" And we used to keep a shotgun handy because on the ranch you never knew what you'd need it for. But anyway, Mom said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "There's a bobcat in the chicken coop and it's killing the chickens." And of course Dad ran down here and he did kill a bobcat, but it had killed about 30 hens. They don't just kill one to eat, they just kill anything they can get their hands on. So it taught us a good lesson about keeping the bobcats away from the chickens. Mom and Dad started working at the Timpute mines when it opened up. Mother worked as a cook and Dad worked in the mill. And they would go every day out there, and so because the chickens, you didn't want to leave the eggs in the nest because they'd get all messy and dirty. So every day at noon, while I was in high school, when they had these chickens, I used to have to come home and gather the eggs so that they wouldn't get all messy and dirty. And that was one of my projects during high school, was gathering the eggs at noon.
My mother was Fressa Stewart Wadward. She was 102 when she died. And the one before she died, she said she was going to live, when she hit 100, she said she's going to live to 110. But she didn't quite make that, she made 102. And, my mother, when they moved here, her dad and his brother started the town of Alamo. They come in from Kanab, Utah.
Bought a ranch.
Huh?
They bought a ranch.
And they bought a ranch in Alamo, town Alamo. That used to be a ranch. And they bought it and they started town Alamo.
Mapped it out.
They mapped it out, and mapped the streets out, and that was started town Alamo. And my mother was the first white Mormon baby born in Alamo, and was 97 when he died. And he was born in Panaca. Come over here and bought a ranch, started cattle business, and their other brother went to Vegas and started business in Vegas. The 6 kids, they had 5 girls and did me. They only had 1 boy. And my mother, she was a lovely woman, and everybody liked her. And she worked in the church. She taught classes in church, young women, in primary and young women. And anyhow, she gave me lots of advice. She one day told me I was feeling kind of low and kind of mad at somebody, and he said, "Charles, you don't have to. You can disagree with them, but that don't mean you don't like them. Don't dislike them. You like them anyhow. You just don't agree with them." And so anyhow, that was her feeling toward people. I don't think she ever did. She done just like she told me. She didn't agree with people, but that didn't make her not dislike them. And the only boy, everybody said they spoiled me real bad. My sister.
They did.
That's what Verla said. But I don't think they did. But I tell you, they
He liked to be waited on hand and foot.
well, but they told me what to do too. When I got old enough to start dating, they let me know how to date. So anyhow, I got lots of advice from my sisters, but they love me and I love them. They do anything for me and I do anything for them. Well, first memory is we come up here. Dad used to come up here in the summer and take care of the cows. And I always thought that'd be a great place to spend the summer up here in the mountains and in the hills, because I like the outdoors when I was that young. And I did remember coming up here and staying in the old sheep wagon. First we stayed down at the Indian place, and there for a year or two, and then we moved straight up here. It did plot here by a cabin, and the guy by the name of Christie owned it. And I remember him. He was kind of odd old boy. He had about 30 head of sheep, and he packed a gun on his side. I thought that was kind of fancy, you know. And we spent all from when I got out of school. I'd come up and stay here till 2 o'clock. Sometime I'd be a week or so late getting back to school. And we'd only go in about every 2 or 3 weeks. We'd go in for groceries and stuff and back. And sometime I wouldn't go in with Mother and Dad. I'd stay out here. And I used to stay out, and when Uvalde was haying, I used to stay out here and help them by myself. I'd take my sleeping bag and go up and sleep on their porch. And about every 3 days we'd have to go and pump water. So I'd go and pump water for the cows over the dry farm. And that when I was, probably started when I was in the 8th grade, all through high school. One day they told Charles, we approve Verla. So I wanted her to know that she got approved, you know.
My first memory of Cherry Creek was when I visited my aunt and uncle Thelma and Lauren Bunker. Before we ever moved to the valley, my folks had bought part of the ranch, and so Jake and I come and spend a month up here with them. And on our way home, Uncle Lauren and my grandfather Bingham were taking us as far as Tonopah. We lived in San Francisco, and they were taking us that far to Tonopah, and we come and stayed and stayed here and had breakfast with Grandma in Wadsworth, and then we went on to Tonopah from here.
And you didn't know she was your future mother-in-law?
No, I had
You
no
had no
idea. I probably wouldn't have spoke to Charles if he'd have been here. I don't remember if he was even here. Those old cars probably didn't go over 40 miles an hour at top speed, and on these roads they wouldn't have gone very fast. When Dad and I were first married, June the 22nd, 54, we had our wedding in the temple, and we took off from there and went to Grand Canyon for a week. Stayed up there and come back through Cedar and bought groceries and come to our little cabin we'd fixed up behind Grandpa and Grandma's, but they were all up here, so we come up here. And Grandma they had an old the little sheep wagon was out here behind the cabin, and so that was the bedroom we got for the first, while we were up here, and so that's where we spent the second week of our married life, was in that sheep wagon and all around here with everybody. It was fun. We had a good time. Then we went back and Grandpa started to work out at the, where did you work for first? The State Highway.
No, Timpute.
You worked at Timpute first, that's right. He worked at Timpute at the mine for something. And
Did labor.
just labor at the Timpute mine for a little while, and then he got on with the State Highway, and that started his career with the State Highway. He went on as survey, and then he later went into maintenance and worked out of Alamo for 30 years.
I never did think, when we come up here and we slept in that old sheep wagon, I thought, all years I spent in that sheep wagon when we was riding, I never did think I'd spend a part of my honeymoon in that old sheep wagon. That was kind of set me back. That was kind of quite a spring to think that every time I look at the picture of us when we was just little kids, did I ever think I'd marry her and come up here and stay in that old sheep wagon where I spent all my, when we run round up our cows and stuff, I stayed in that old sheep wagon. But it was nice. It was comfortable. And
It was a nice bed.
Nice bed, so we done all
That's
right.
all it had, though, was the bed.
Yeah. Then here in my dad's old truck here, he drove it for years, and one day he come in and said, "I'm too old. My reflexes are not very good. I never have had a wreck, so I won't hang keys up." And he did. He quit driving it. So they brought it up here, leave it up here and get wood and tough with it. And they left here and they never did take it back. It's still sitting here. That story is in their old truck. Well, that hunting, that was always a big time up here. There were a lot of people that come up here and hunt. I remember that old elm tree there. One time they had 5 big bucks hanging out of that tree, what we got. And there were lots of people, several people what would come up here and stay here and hunt. And that was that was fun. Sitting
Several,
around
I'd
at night.
I'd say half the valley would come up here and hunt out of this cabin in this area.
Sitting around and tell a
All the
story.
family would, for sure.
All the big deer what got away, big bucks. This here's the famous deer hunting area up here, named Buck Basin. One time we went up there, it's about 4 miles up there, I guess, right up this kind of here, this road here. You'd get up part way and then you get to the top of summit, and then you got to either walk or ride horses or 4-wheeler or something. You can't drive on up in the actual Buck Basin. But we went up there once, and after you get over summit in Buck Basin there's a big green area there. We got up there and there were about 12, 15 big bucks feeding down through that green spot. And so that's how it got the name of Buck Basin. And so from then on we'd always make a trip or two up there during deer season.
It's famous. All the men that come to hunt up here always want to end up in Buck Basin.
Or Buck Basin.
But my favorite memories of this area is the pine nuts. There's some real good pine nut trees up here, and it looks like we're going to have some good pine nuts. But I always decided the best way to pick pine nuts is when the polygamists bring their families up here and pick them to sell them. And you can go there and buy them a lot cheaper than picking them up one by pine nut at a time. But anyway, this is good country up here.
I got my first big buck up in that area. It was a free pointer, had big spread of horn. That was my first buck I got, was up in that area. Oh yeah, old privy or outhouse, or whatever you want to call it, there. But, you know, it was quite a deal. You'd take out running from the house to get to it, and you get here and it had willow and stuff all over it, and you start looking for rattlesnakes, and then before you got to it, there was a bunch of stinging nettles.
And if you're a woman, you wanted to be careful, because if there was someone in there and you just decided to squat a little bit, it really made the bottom hurt when you backed into a stinging nettle, I'll tell you. Some of the kids didn't know it, and they'd get into it, and once we come up here with a bunch of girls, pine nut picking, some cousins, Linnell and Barbara Frainer and a bunch of them, and 2 or 3 of them got in the stinging nettle when they backed into the bushes to get away from people, and they were miserable. It hurt.
Then here's a picture of our kids, our family. We had 5, going from left to right. Dwayne, our youngest, Erlene is our oldest, and then Monty is their third one, and then Leanne, their second, and Janie, their fourth, and Dwayne was our 5th. And that's our kid we had. Graduated, I worked for Lincoln County Road Department for just 3 months or so, and then I went to work out to Tempe Mines, and I worked there for probably 6 months, a year, and then I went to work for a state highway. I worked in the survey gang for about 3 or 4 years, and then I transferred to maintenance and worked the rest of my 34 years for a state highway from there. And then when I was working for the state, Mark, my son-in-law, got me in the operating engineers union, and so
When you retired?
When I retired, and I went to work out at the test site, and I worked there for about 14 and a half years out at the Nevada test site. And what I done, I run the equipment, and when I worked for the state highway for about 8 summers, for about 4 months, we went and put a 2-inch overlay on all old highways all over the state. I went to Beatty, Searchlight, and Moapa Valley, Virgin Valley, and all over laying oil. 2-inch oil lay on the...
Started when the kids were quite little. The money was tight, and so for Christmas I used to work deer season up at the Alco Cafe as a waitress, and I did that for years to make our Christmas money so we could Christmas our family. And then when Dwayne was about 3 or 4 years old, my mother come to live with us. My father had passed away, and my mother come to live with us. And Carl Hastings got me to start having a drill team in Alamo. And I had to work a half a day in order for the county to hire me. So I worked in the library for a couple hours, and then I would work with the girls in the drill team. And for about 8 years, I had a real successful drill team. Erlene and Leanne were both in my drill team. And we went all over the state with the boys, and up to Reno 2 or 3 times to the big tournaments up there. Had a great time there. And during this time, In those days, kindergarten was new in the state, and you didn't have to have a certified teacher to be a kindergarten teacher, and they made me take the kindergarten class, which I learned to love. I taught kindergarten for about 15 years. Had very successful program. Everybody loved it. I loved it. It was quite a career for me. So I was known as a kindergarten teacher without a certificate. And after that many years, then they had to have a certified teacher teach kindergarten, so they transferred me over to the high school, and I was secretary there for 5 years, and that's where I retired from, as the secretary from the high school. And those were my working days. We bought the ranch in 1977. We lived in Alamo for a long time. And in 01, we sold the home in Alamo and moved up here. We lived in a little trailer we bought to live in while we built our home, and it took us 2 years to build this home. And we've lived here, of course, ever since. We love our home, and it's very comfortable, and we've had lots and lots of doings here, weddings and parties and reunions. In 06, we went on a mission to the San Diego Mormon Battalion Visitor Center. We spent 18 months there serving our mission, a special time in our lives. We lived, rented an apartment, lived right by the visitor center, made lifelong friends there. Our missionary companions were so neat, and we had a great, great mission. We had a couple of real neat conversions. And it was the missionaries' job is to take the flags down from the Mormon battalion and bring them in at night and put them up in the morning. And one morning they all go out. Him and Brother Beach went out to put the flag up, and Brother Beach swung around and
hit me right
in the eye and cut his eye open right here with the flagpole.
Big old open here.
So it was a big deal. Oh, everybody was so worried, and we just carried around, and they butterflied it shut and put this stuff on it, and they put a bandage over his eye. Well, the next morning when we went to prayer meeting, all the men that come to the prayer meeting had a bandage. Oh, they had bandages here and here.
Over their
they all put. We've got a picture of that where they all are bandaged up. It was so funny. They all wore a bandage all day, so Charles wouldn't be the only missionary that had a bandage on his. My hobby, my sewing room. All my kids and even some of my neighbors bring me all their clothes to mend and fix. But I love to sew, I love to quilt. Now all I make is mostly baby quilts, baby blankets. It's a hobby I've always loved to sew. I learned to sew in home ec in high school. And I made a lot of my girls' dresses and a lot of their clothes and my own for many years, but I don't sew like that anymore. It's mostly just mending and blankies and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, what are you going to tell us about?
It's the best place.
Okay, I guess I get to tell you about the story of these steps. When we decided to build up here, I was getting very anxious. And I love to mess with cement and rocks and stuff like that because I had done some of that down at our other home. And so anyway, one day I got the bright idea to make some steps up this hill. There wasn't even a road up here when I started these steps, and I started down by the cement ditch, and I would mix cement in a wheelbarrow and put rocks together and started the steps up. Well, pretty soon I ran out of rocks that were close by, so I get all my little grandsons, I take them up Curtis Canyon and we'd gather rocks. And I'd take a weenie roast, and this was a big deal with the kids. We'd go up and get a load of rocks, and I'd give them a weenie roast, a marshmallow roast, and then we'd come home and they'd unload the rocks. Well, it got so the farther we got up here, the more help I kind of needed, so I would hire the little boys to help me make the cement and put the rocks together. It took me 2 years to build this stair step, and by the time we started to put our lawn in up on the house after we had moved in, it was up close to the top. And this is what I called my love seat. And I made this. We got this rock up from Erlene and Mark's ranch when they lived up in Gandy, Utah. These flat rocks that we're sitting on come from there. I could see them, I just knew what I had to do with them, so I brought them down here and made this seat out of them. That's where these flat rocks come from. Tyrell and Quinn and Bingham, and really helped me a lot. Quinn thinks he's the one that put the most labor in here, but I'd give him just enough money to entice him to come up and help me again. So they were kind of glad to come up and work with me. After Clayton and Charles bought the ranch, they bought some cattle, and we started moving our cattle from the ranch here to Cherry Creek and Garden and Cove Valley. Every year we would go up in the spring and back in the fall. And our children had to go with us and help us on these long cattle drives. We drove them up the highway to the Heiko field. We owned a field up there. We'd leave them there overnight, and then we'd start from there to go up to Cove Valley and the dry farm. And it was usually a 3 or 4 day drive. Our children, lots of their friends would come with us, but there were times when it was cold, and when it was hard and long.
Long days.
The kids would beg Dad, "Dad, isn't this far enough? We'll leave them and come back tomorrow." But Charles always had to get them just so far so that they wouldn't turn around and come back. He'd say, "One more turn, kids." And it was strenuous and it was hard. It was fun to begin with. And the kids would start out riding the horses and liking it, but pretty soon everybody was really tired and would want to get in the pickups, and we'd go along in the back with the pickups, and the kids would take turns riding the horses and driving the cattle. A lot of times some of us would just walk behind the cows and bring the calves along that would lag along and behind the cows. They were hard drives a lot of the time. The kids learned there to work and endure to the end. It was a lot of work, but our grandkids every once in a while say, "Grandma or Grandpa, you need to have one more drive just so our kids will know what it's like," because those are memories they'll never forget. Charles is really a cowman. He could tell all his cows, if he's seen a cow anywhere out in the range or anywhere, he could tell whose cow it was. He could almost tell you what calf went with that cow. He knew his animal.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed working. That one thing my dad taught me was work hard and play hard. But when I work, you work hard, and so that was hard work doing the cows. But if you do what you enjoy, it's work, but it's fun work. That wasn't my dad always said. As long as you enjoy doing it, work, why do it.
We served about 9.5 years altogether in the Las Vegas Temple, which is a highlight of our older years. We thoroughly enjoyed it, made lots of friends, and felt like we'd really served the Lord. It was a special time of our life.
The thing I enjoyed about our mission in the temple is all the friends we made. We made lifelong friends from serving on our mission and in the temple. I hope that I taught my kids, like he said, endure to end, and be happy with what you got, and don't wish you got more. You'd be happy with what you got. And I enjoy my kids, and I enjoy all my grandkids. I have tried to teach my grandkids to be that way too. And we have had lots of fun with our grandkids. Between my kids and my grandkids, that's what has made my life. And all my in-laws, I want to know how much I love them too.